Are the aspirations of young African people accessible? This is a relevant question because for most of us listening to the podcast, we are young, at least in a relative sense. Looking at the stats of the podcast, it would seem that a few people who listen are between the ages of 18 and 25, and then a majority are between 35 and I think 40. We do have some people who are between 50 and 60 who listen to the podcast, and I'm honored that those people would hang around here. But from the figures that I've rolled out here, you can see that a lot of the listeners are between the ages of 18 and 40. And so we are young people. And so that's why questions like these are important. So it's also important because a number of us are currently trying to run a business or float some businesses in the future. And besides, for those of you who are Nigerians listening to the podcast, even if you do not run a business now, you know that it's only a matter of time because eventually every single Nigerian starts a business. The only difference is some of us started when we're young, out of school, and in our first job. And some people wait until they retire, they don't know what to do, and then the children say, "Hey, mommy, daddy, why don't you start a poultry or start doing fisheries or something?" So we either start at the beginning or we either start at the end, but it's safe to say that most Nigerians, anyway, are going to be involved in business one way or another. And so, this question of whether we're locked in an environment where our true potential can come out or whether our true potential is being stifled is a very important and a timely one. So, yes, we are facing some infrastructure challenges for those of us youngins and newbies who are trying to grow businesses. There's the power issue for those of you who have stuff that you need to manufacture, and power affects us all. Because even as a budding wedding photographer in Lagos, it was one of the hassles that I had to face where you have a job coming up, but then NEPA has been doing its thing. And because of that, you have 5 or 6 batteries, but every single battery is flat. So now, of course, you can't run the household gen until a certain time. But then, like in our own house, we would run the gen from I think it was from about 6 to midnight. And depending on how many batteries you have, sometimes it's not enough to give everything a decent charge, especially if you're a videographer. For a photographer, you can cope. You get 2 batteries charged, you're good. You can rough the wedding. But for a videographer, with all the cameras that you have, video is power hungry. You can't charge just 2 batteries and know that you are good for the day. So even for people who are in service-based industries, at the very least, you need to power your laptop. So yeah, in one way or another, power is a challenge. Finance is also a challenge. People complain about not being able to access loans quickly because banks are more interested in high turnover projects and stuff like that. They're not interested in little folk. Transportation issues, and then the whole thing of manpower and education. It's something that I've heard complained about a lot, especially in the wedding and the event space. Everybody complains that we would like good help. If you're a wedding planner, you would like good. I don't know. I don't know what you people call them, assistants or project managers or whatever. But the thing is, there are manpower problems. People are not properly educated. Those who are educated want to charge an arm and a leg. So, yes, we do have those problems of power, finance, transportation, and manpower, education, and all that. And then, plus, there's this thing that keeps creeping up, especially in the wedding and the event space, about old guards, monopolies, and entrenched interests. Because I remember when I moved to Abuja, or rather, when I moved back to Abuja after Patience and I got married, maybe, gosh, I can't remember how many years ago that was. Anyway, after we moved in, there was talk at the time about cliques and cabals forming that had a monopoly on high-priced northern weddings. And I used to hear all that a lot, and it used to do my head in because anyway, no point in rehashing my own opinion here, but just sitting down and griping and complaining that some people are a monopoly or they're a cabal is not doing anything to help your situation, even if it is, in fact, the case that these cabals or cliques actually do exist. But one thing that we need to bear in mind is that these challenges are not unique to our own generation or in our own society. So let's look at things about the old guard, this whole thing about oligarchies, the old guard, monopolies, and entrenched interests. Let's look at. Okay, I'm recording this on an iPhone, and I'm assuming that a couple of you listening are listening to this using an iPhone. So there was a time when IBM was the old guard or the monopoly, and Apple was the upstart. But now things have changed. Apple is now the monopoly or the entrenched interest, and then the rest of us are now the upstarts. Anybody who is trying to get into that kind of tech space. And believe it or not, there was a time when IBM was the upstart and somebody else was the entrenched interest. So it's not unique to this generation. It's just part of the way of life. So yes, maybe that cabal exists, but eventually you're going to get really good at your business, especially if you pay attention to all the things that we discuss about here on the podcast, about personal selling, networking, stuff like that. And if you do a good job, then it just means that one day somebody else is going to be able to complain about you and say Okechukwu and Kemi and Philemon and Erasmus, they're the ones they are the clique. They have locked down the Abuja wedding space. Every single high value wedding, if it doesn't pass through them, you're not going to be able to get in on the action, blah, 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 blah. So today, you complain about someone else. If you do a good job, tomorrow, somebody else is going to complain about you. And it's always the same. The big person was once an upstart. Who else? Richard Branson. He used to be an upstart at some point. Tony Elumelu used to be an upstart. I was surprised to find out that, in fact, he used to be a salesman selling photocopiers in Nigeria back in the day. Because I didn't know that the sales profession was an established thing in Nigeria, in a sense, So that caught me by surprise. And photocopy salesmen were just, I thought, a stereotype that existed only in the West, the UK, America. And then, of course, at some point, Mo Abudu was also an upstart as well. So everybody starts off at some point being an upstart. So don't bemoan your situation too much. Just do your best, play your part, and let's hope for the best. Now, of course, I believe personally that even though these infrastructure challenges are there, complaining is not going to do us any good. We can't wait for the Nigerian state to cure infrastructure challenges. But am I saying that we shouldn't bother about whether NEPA works, whether we have a functioning power grid or not? I'm not saying that we should ignore those things. In fact, I believe that those of us who are interested in private enterprise and business, that we should get involved eventually when we can afford to in not just politics per se, but we should be interested in making sure that we have a voice when it comes to shaping the public policy of our day, because that is the environment in which our businesses function, thrive, or die, and that is also going to be the environment in which our kids grow up. So I'm not saying that you ought to run for president or for governor, but when you can afford to, and when you have the means, find ways to get involved, whether it's elective office, pressure groups, being a technocrat. We need to find some way to shape the policy infrastructure of our respective countries. So if you're Nigerian and listening to this podcast, I think that's what you ought to do. And if you're American and you're listening to this podcast and you're not happy what's going on in your country, I think that is what you should do, especially those of us who are in private enterprise, because we do learn important skills of figuring out what's important to people, what the goal is, mobilizing people and capital to solve problems. So I think we are uniquely suited to solve some of these challenges. Of course, the disadvantage that we have is that we're not natural born politicians, because politicking is an art in its own right. Anyway, so don't wait for the state to cure infrastructure challenges. Find alternative power sources. Luckily for me, Patience and I were able to get our inverter system back when things were quite affordable. Even at the time, we thought it was expensive, because for us to have two 80-watt batteries, or is it 160-watt batteries with a 2.5, I think is it 2.5, is it kilowatts or megahertz or whatever. I'm not sure about the technical stuff. We're able to get that for 150K, and that was just when we got married. It allows us to power the house. What else? We don't put the fridge on it, so but it powers all the electricity, the fans, the TV. What else? So so for us, that alternative power source solves a lot of problems, and so there are lots of things that we can look at. Petty solar, so that your phones and your laptop is charged, so that you're able to call your clients and you have a full battery to be able to run presentations for your clients when you meet up with them at Sedi Plaza or whatever, assuming that you don't have an office now. So if you're a wedding planner and that's your thing, you do presentations on your computer. There are things that we can do to get by. We also have to take the responsibility to build our business acumen so that we can raise finance. Because I've attended a number of forums where you find people from, what's it called? The Bank of Industry. There's Bank of Industry. I can't remember. There are loads of different Nigerian bodies that their job is just to find businesses that need the help and allocate capital. So I found that some of these sessions, the people who run the show say that one of the problems that they have is that people do not know how to put together a convincing presentation. So some people approach them without a business plan or business plans that are incomplete. So you need to improve your business acumen. That's not something that I can do or I can advise on. So you have to look for help elsewhere. But you need to learn, how do you put together a business presentation? When financiers want to throw money at you, what are they looking for? What are the key things that your document should hit or your presentation should hit? So raise your business acumen, and it might not solve the problem of you getting a business loan from Zenith Bank, for instance, but your business acumen goes up. You're able to put together better proposals, and who knows, you might not be able to get financing from Zenith Bank, but you might have done a good enough job that you're able to find private investors because it looks like you've done your homework. And then besides money, since the right kind of people that you would like to work with are probably too expensive, so look for other ways to engage, to motivate people, and to employ people. For now, there's just no other way around it. Or you can just do what a friend of mine did. She found someone who was Raz, in quote, or not put together, and she polished up the person, in quote. And right now they're doing pretty good they're doing pretty good as a team. They both love and are very loyal to each other. Of course, the young lady is loyal to Madame for finding her and for training her and for cleaning her up, in quote, and bringing her up to speed. So when it comes to the old guard or the supposed cliques that we have, like this thing in Abuja where people say that there's a northern clique that control the wedding industry, just learn how to compete. The internet is kind of democratizing the space. So maybe, yes, in the old days before Instagram was a thing and before the internet was becoming really powerful, I guess maybe it would have been easier back then for people to form a cabal. Like, we're from the right family, we know the right people. Between us, let's have this referral club and let's control all the big weddings that come upward of the Niger. So maybe that was possible in the past, but now the internet kind of democratizes the space, and so there's opportunity for us to compete. So this is primarily not a sales episode because I know that I haven't directly spoken about any sales theory or tips and tricks that we can use to build our businesses. But I've figured it's important for me to make this podcast recording today because maybe my timeline isn't properly curated, but I'm seeing too much out there about people being hampered by the African experience or by the Nigerian experience. And let's stop making our environment the excuse for the reason why our wedding practice or our consulting practice or our shoe selling business or our I don't know, whatever business it is that you're involved in, let's stop using the African experience or the Nigerian experience as an excuse. There are things that we can do. We're smart enough and we're creative enough, and we can figure it out. So let's stop using it for as excuses, Because besides, you look back and you find that people of every time, every generation have always had things holding them down, have always had their own set of excuses. You want to argue that our excuses are not as important, or maybe their challenges were less important, because I do run into people who say that our parents had it easier because Nigeria was, what's it called? What do you call these things? Population dynamics were different, so more avenues for employment and blah blah blah. So I do run into those people who say our parents had it easier, but I'm not interested in making all those arguments, and neither should you. If you're going to blame population dynamics or the African experience or the Nigerian experience, you're perpetually going to be trapped. So we're young, we're smart, we're hardworking. Let's think about it, and we'll be able to push through. But then again, remember, I'm not saying disregard these problems. These problems are there. And for those of you who listened to my recording about, was it 2 or 3 days ago, when I was on the fuel queue? The fuel queues in Abuja haven't disappeared yet. Just like I was saying then, I'm not saying that we should ignore these things or turn a blind eye. But as we get better, as we get wealthier, and as we get more, capable and confident in our abilities, let's find ways to get involved in the policy space so that we can make things better for our kids, so that when their own time is right, they can have a new set of challenges to start complaining about, to say, oh, this is the reason why we're not moving forward, or this is our complaint, or this is our hassle. I guess young people will always complain. Anyway, thank you very much for listening to the Sales for the Nigerian Wedding Industry podcast. I'm your host, Abuja-based sales consultant and event media professional, Tavishma Ayide. Thank you very much for your time and attention. I'll make sure that at the next recording, I stay away from public policy issues and focus on the reason why a lot of you subscribe to this podcast in the first place, which is to discuss all things business and personal selling, to see how we can improve our businesses one sale at a time and one conversation at a time. So thank you very much for your time and attention. I'll catch you guys at the next recording.